Ladies and gents, hello and welcome. Today we've got a review on a 15-inch MacBook Pro. This is the late 2013 model, and today we're going to talk about its specs, the build quality, we'll do the externals, we'll talk about the internals, we'll see how this thing stacks up here in 2024, 11 years since it came out, and we'll decide, is it worth buying here in this day and age. All right, so first things first, let's check out the specs of my specific MacBook. We're running macOS Big Sur. We've got the 2.0 gigahertz quad-core i7. That is a 4th gen Intel CPU, 8 gigabytes of DDR3 memory. That is paired with Intel Iris Pro graphics. And for the storage, we've got 250 gigabytes of flash solid-state storage. So all that said, this is the base configuration. This was the cheapest model of the 15-inch that you could get in late 2013. This was a big update over the early 2013 and the 2012 Retina MacBook Pros. We'll talk about that in just a moment. You can see my battery here has seen better days. Our cycles are over 1,000 with service being recommended. And I can say that that is true. This thing does tend to shut down before the battery reaches 0, which is a little bit annoying. So real quick, let's go over the externals. We've got our 15.4-inch Retina display, gorgeous panel. It's an LCD, 60 Hertz. Definitely not as nice as some of the newer MacBooks, but for what it's worth and how much this thing costs, a really nice display. Then down here, we've got a keyboard. This is before Apple switched to the butterfly keyboard, so this is essentially the same thing as the new keyboards they have on the current MacBooks. Here we have a trackpad, unfortunately not Force Touch, so this is one of the last MacBooks to feature an actual clicking trackpad. So if for some reason you prefer that, this is going to be a laptop for you. We've got speakers here on either side of the keyboard, and it is a nice large palm rest, and it's very good for people with larger hands like myself to use. Over here on the right, we've got ourselves a USB 3.0 port, HDMI 1.4. So something kind of annoying is this does not do 4K 60. You're stuck at 4K 30 or 1440p 60. So that is a bummer there. We have an SD card slot, which is nice. And on the left side, we have the MagSafe 2 charger, 2 Thunderbolt 2 ports, another USB 3.0 port, and a headphone jack. Closing the lid, you can see that this is a very thin and compact design. While it is a 15-inch MacBook, this is, I believe, thinner and lighter than the newest 16-inch models that Apple has on the market. On the bottom, looks like every other MacBook that you can see. And we have the Wi-Fi and the Bluetooth antenna here on the back. All right, so that is the externals. And one last fun thing, we do have that light up Apple logo here. And there you can see that is something we don't have anymore. Okay, so let's talk about performance. I went ahead and ran Geekbench 6, which took quite some time to run, but here are the results for that. Single core came in at just under 1,000, multi-core at 3,490. So if we were to compare this to an Apple M1 chip, that single core is going to be about 2,000 and the multi-core is close to 8,000. So this is somewhere in the ballpark of 1/2 to 1/3 of the raw CPU performance compared to the newer Apple Silicon chips. And graphics wise, this does have the Intel Iris Pro graphics. Our metal score came in at a measly 2,000. That is 1/10 of what the Apple M1 GPU offers. Speaking about specs and graphics, this was actually the first time Apple did not include dedicated graphics on their flagship MacBook, at least since the Intel transition. If you remember the 2009, 10, 11, 12, and Retina 2012 and the Retina early 2013 all had dedicated GPUs with a low power option as well. This one does not. It only has a single graphics card, and that is the Intel Iris Pro. If you spend a little extra money, you could get the NVIDIA GT750M with 2 gigabytes of GDR5 VRAM. That was in addition to this Intel Iris Pro. So for the first time, Apple did not include a dedicated graphics card on their flagship 15-inch MacBook Pro. Why? I don't know. This is still a very capable card, and it is pretty good for basic tasks like navigating the UI. You can do a little bit of light gaming, and in fact, you can actually do some video editing. So a little fun fact is it was very similar to this, a 2015 15-inch MacBook Pro that I actually started this YouTube channel on. I edited my first, 30 or 40 videos on that computer. Was a base configuration, had a very similar CPU to this one, and had the same graphics card. So you can see here, I'm scrolling through Apple's website and it is actually very smooth. The things are loading in as they should, and there's really not much stuttering. So I know Apple's website's really optimized, but it is still a lot for this computer to have to deal with all these animations and things on the screen, and it's handling it just fine. So I think web browsing on this is certainly usable. I would say you can do just about anything on here except play demanding games or edit some really aggressive videos. One limitation for this computer is the fact that it only comes with 8 gigabytes of memory. Now, that's not that unusual because even the newest Apple Silicon computers came with 8 gigs until just a few days ago, but this was actually the last flagship Apple MacBook to feature 8 gigs. In 2014, when they refreshed this lineup here, 16 gigabytes came standard on the 15-inch MacBook Pro, and that would stay the same moving forward, at least on the high-end MacBook. Now, in terms of CPU, there were a few options. You could get a 2 gigahertz, I think you could get 2.2 and maybe a 2.6. Those are all essentially the same thing, at least when you're looking at them at this day and age. Maybe like 5 to 10% performance, but in the scheme of things, that's really not going to matter for what you're using this MacBook for here in 2024. So I would say the biggest thing to look out for in one of these is if you can get 16 gigs of RAM, definitely do that. And if you can get the NVIDIA GT 750M, that's going to help you out a lot if you're doing any sort of creative work or if you're going to be playing some sort of games. Storage on this is actually upgradable. This has a NVMe slot. It's a proprietary Apple slot, so you got to have a dedicated Apple OEM drive, but those are found pretty cheaply on eBay. You can go up to 1 terabyte on that. So in terms of storage, if you're not super handy, then I would get as much as you can, but you can always upgrade it later on if you want. So what's a good price for one of these? Well, I can tell you I paid about $110 for this. Of course, it's a base spec model. It's not in the best condition. It's got some sticker marks here and a few dents and scratches. The back has some adhesive residue. So it's not the prettiest MacBook, but it functions just fine. The only flaw I think is the battery, which has over 1,000 cycles. So I would say if you're buying one of these, look out for the battery cycles. If you can get one under 500, I think you'll be in really good shape. Something else to keep in mind, this is running Big Sur, and that is as far as it gets. You cannot update past Big Sur, at least not natively. You can install OpenCore Legacy Patcher, which is a fantastic piece of software that will work really well and allow you to get even the newest version of macOS Sequoia running essentially flawlessly on here. I will say that it's going to burn your battery quite a bit faster because of how demanding that macOS version is compared to something like Big Sur, but if you absolutely want the newest features and you don't really care about performance that much, you can definitely install Sequoia or Sonoma or Monterey or whatever version you want on here, and it will run just fine. You can see I fired up Boot Camp Assistant here. You may be asking yourself, what is that? Well, it is the built-in macOS application that lets you run Windows 10 on an Intel-based Mac. That's right. Up until the Apple Silicon transition, Apple included out of the box software that let you dual boot Windows 10 or I guess Windows 11 onto your Intel-based computer. So that means all you need here is a Windows 10 ISO. You can download that free from Microsoft, and you can partition your internal drive and install Windows 10 and then switch back and forth. It is pretty easy to do, and it's something that is not possible on Apple Silicon. You have to do some other workarounds and essentially use a virtual machine. Not needed here. You can dual boot and allocate all your computer's resources towards running Windows on that version of the SSD. Now, if you are going to do that, gotta recommend more than 256 gigs because that is going to be cutting it pretty close with that disk space split between 2 operating systems. So I would definitely get 500 if you can get that. All that said, can I recommend this in 2024? I would say yes if you're on a really tight budget and you want a MacBook that has a nice screen, decent speakers, really good keyboard, pretty good trackpad, and a bunch of ports, then this is a good model for you. Performance is not great, but it's not terrible either. You've got a quad-core 4th gen Intel CPU, and depending on which graphics card you get, it should be just fine for everyday tasks. And like me, you can even start a YouTube channel on it, editing 4K 60 FPS videos. Might take some time, and I recommend you leave it plugged in while you do that, but it is possible. So I think that's going to do it for this quick little review. Leave me a comment down below. What are your thoughts on the late 2013 MacBook Pro 15-inch? Are you using one? Do you have any interest in getting one? I'm curious to hear what you guys think about this 11-year-old MacBook Pro. All right, thank you so much for watching, and as always, I look forward to seeing you in another one of my videos.